A woman who is not loved is nothing, and that's that. No matter how old she is, young, old, mother, mistress, whatever, a woman who is not loved is a lost woman.
Dress shabbily, and they remember the dress. Dress impeccably, and they remember the woman.
Il n'y a pas de succès sans copie, sans imitation, ça n'existe pas.
Hey friend, welcome to my channel, Karine Alourde, where we deep dive and break down the most iconic stars in history. If you're not yet subscribed, please be sure to do so and turn your notifications on so you never miss an upload. Now let's get into this video. Today we are talking about Coco Chanel, and yes, she is iconic. She has paved the way for a lot of designers, and she introduced pants to women. But I want you guys to hold your comments about how much you love her until you finish watching the video, because Miss Gabrielle Bonheur was not the most pleasant person. The deeper I got into her story, the more I was like, oh my goodness. We'll just get into all of that in the video, but it's just who she was as a person and how we quote her daily and we love her. To find out a lot of these things, it was kind of eye-opening. So without further ado, let's get in. My favorite quote from Coco Chanel is, "Luxury must be comfortable, otherwise it's not luxury." I love this. I agree. As early as 1915, Harper's Bazaar raved over Chanel's designs. And they said this, "The woman who hasn't at least one Chanel is hopelessly out of fashion. This season, the name Chanel is on the lips of every buyer," end quote. Chanel's rise ended the corset era, and under her influence, long hair, hobble skirts became a thing of the past, and her designs redefined post-World War II fashion. Chanel's signature look was a youthful ease, liberated physicality, and sporty confidence. She popularized women's pants. Coco Chanel wore pants in Venice to make travel easier, and Coco Chanel found riding a horse in a long skirt to be very uncomfortable. So Chanel was inspired by the British elite's passion for horses and hunting. Sporting activities inspired her clothing designs. From her yachting excursions, she appropriated nautical clothing, horizontal striped shirts, bell-bottom pants, crew neck sweater. And she was just a tomboy at heart also. She really loved sports. Most iconic fashion items that Chanel is known for was, of course, the Chanel suit. Chanel introduced the little black dress, which is still iconic today, a style still worn today. In 1926, Vogue dubbed the Chanel little black dress with long sleeves the garçon, little boy look. Vogue predicted that this simple yet chic design would become a virtual uniform for tasteful women. Women needed affordable fashion during the Great Depression, and Chanel said she made the poor walk like millionaire.
In 1926, she introduced her signature little black dress, and she was one of the first to put women into chic, stylish trousers. And by having a career and enjoying a liberated love life, she symbolized the post-war aspirations of a generation of newly emancipated women.
Chanel launched a soldier-inspired handbag in 1929. The thin shoulder strap freed users' hands, and Chanel updated the design in 1955 after her comeback. And she also had the Chanel suits and jewelry line also, but most iconically is her perfume line.
Coco made a daring move and launched a perfume. Named after her lucky number, Chanel No. 5 was the world's most expensive.
My favorite scent from Chanel was always Chance by Chanel. I used to love the No. 5, but now I hate it. It's very strong. As I grew up, I'm like, I only loved it because of Marilyn Monroe, not because of myself. And then now I'm like, I like a sweeter, more romantic scent. And it's a pretty strong scent. I used to wear it after a bath every night before bed. But no, it's not my favorite. So her fave color was black. Chanel favored black over white, beige, gold, and red. And Coco Chanel believed black accentuated a woman's radiance. She thought a little black dress was classy. The iconic fashion designer believed that wine and caviar would keep her young, so she had it several times a day. She also famously remarked, "I only drink champagne on two occasions, when I am in love and when I am not." Chanel was the mistress of some of the most influential men of her time, but she unfortunately never married. The 5'2", small in stature icon was known for having a bitter personality. Coco Chanel often criticized her contemporaries, accusing Christian Dior of dressing women like armchairs and questioning Balenciaga's cutting. Vaughn, who was we're going to talk about him more in this video, but he was dedicated to exposing Coco Chanel for her anti-Semitism, YouTube, as well as her spying on behalf of the Germans during the World War II, also addressed the discomfort many felt with the revelations provided in this book. And I agree with his quote, and I think towards the end of the video, you guys will also. He said, "A lot of people in this world don't want the iconic figure of Gabrielle Coco Chanel, one of France's great cultural idols, destroyed. This is definitely something that a lot of people would have preferred to put aside, to forget, to just go on selling Chanel scarves and jewelry," end quote. Now, let's hop into her childhood. I know that was a long intro, but it's giving you a background of who Chanel, the person, was before we get into it. So, Gabrielle Bonheur Chanel was born in Sisters of Providence, poorhouse, and to Eugene Jean, a laundrywoman. Jean's first child, Julia, was born less than a year earlier. Her father, Albert Chanel, was a nomadic street vendor who sold work clothes and underwear. The family lived in shacks. Chanel's birth name was Chasnel, believe it or not. Her mom was too sick to go change the name on the birth certificate. It was a mistake. And Albert, her dad, was traveling. He didn't sound like he was around much. Because of the parents' absence, Chanel's last name remained misspelled on her birth certificate. She died as Gabrielle Chanel because correcting her birth certificate would reveal she was born in a poorhouse hospice. The couple lived with 6 children in a one-room apartment, so she didn't at first want people at all to know her origins, where she really came from, in the poverty. It was something of shame for her, so she rather just die with that name. Gabrielle was 11 when her 32-year-old mother passed away. The children ended up not going to school after, and her father sent his 2 sons to work as farm laborers and his 3 daughters to an orphanage. It was a strict, modest life, and Chanel learned to sew in the orphanage, which may have influenced her career. So everything does happen for a reason. Chanel left Aubazin at 18 to live in a Catholic boarding house in Moulins.
She was named Gabrielle Bonheur Chanel. Born on the 19th of August, 1883, she and her 4 brothers and sisters spent much of their childhoods in the public markets of Western France. These were tough times for working-class women. They were second-class citizens. They could not vote and were expected to be subservient to their men. This was the future Gabrielle would have expected for herself. In the winter of 1895, Gabrielle's mother died suddenly. Her father travelled to the nearby town of Aubazin. Gabrielle never saw her father again. The Aubazin orphanage was the largest in the region, run by disciplinarian nuns, and home to hundreds of children, many abandoned by their parents. She had been taught how to sew at the orphanage, but Louise taught her how to sew creatively. After 7 years there, at the age of 18, she was given a choice: come a nun or leave. She arranged to visit her Aunt Louise in the town of Moulins. From there, she enrolled at the Notre Dame finishing school for young ladies. As Gabrielle had no way of paying the fees, she was one of the charity pupils there, but treated very differently to the wealthier girls. After 2 years, aged 20, she was considered ready to face the world on her own.
Chanel later retold her childhood story with more glamorous, untrue details, so she started fabricating her early life. She was known for that and over-glamorizing it. She claimed her father actually left for America after her mother passed away, and he didn't just, put them in an orphanage like that. He went to America to get his money, and she was sent to live with 2 aunts instead of an orphanage. As far as her earlier career, Chanel became a seamstress after learning to sew at Aubazin. She sang in a cabaret for cavalry officers when not sewing. Chanel sang at a café concert in a Moulin pavilion, La Rotonde. So Gabrielle got the nickname Coco when she sang Who Has Seen Coco in cabaret. Chanel's juvenile allure captivated cabaret's military regulars. So Chanel spent 1906 in Vichy. Vichy had concert halls, theaters, and cafes where she hoped to perform. Chanel's youth and physical charms impressed panelists when she went on auditions, but her singing was weak and she couldn't find stage work due to that. Well, she was like a waitress at the Grand Grill. She distributed Vichy's famous mineral water. So Chanel returned to Moulins and La Rotonde after Vichy season. She realized then she couldn't have a serious stage career. In Moulins, Chanel met Etienne Balsan, a young French man who had been in the cavalry and was now a textile heir. At the age of 23, Chanel became Balsan's mistress. She took the place of Emilienne as his favorite mistress. She lived with him for 3 years in his chateau. This area is known for its wooded horse trails and hunting shopping, and it's kind of like those, bougie places. It was an easygoing way to live, and Balsan's wealth attracted people who like to party and satisfy their own desires with all the decadence and glamour. Balsan gave Chanel all the things that come with a rich life, like diamonds, dresses, and pearls.
Etienne Balsan was a young infantry officer and a millionaire, and Coco caught his eye. She was just 21, but Balsan already had one live-in mistress and no intention of settling down. But she realized he could be her meal ticket out of poverty. Just 12 months after Coco and Balsan's meeting, his old mistress had packed her bags. She was now his live-in mistress, a kept woman. She passed her time learning to train and ride Balsan's horses, and she very quickly became an accomplished horsewoman. Coco Chanel, the little orphaned seamstress, was socializing with some of the wealthiest people in France. Balsan indulged Coco's forays into fashion. He gave her a space in his apartment to design and make hats for her friends.
Chanel had an affair with Balsan's friend Captain Boyd Capel in 1908. Chanel later recalled, "Two gentlemen outbid for my hot little body."
Arthur Capel was known to his friends as Boy. He was wealthy, a polo player and a playboy like Balsan. Coco was not just Balsan's mistress, but Boy's as well. The self-made Capel quickly recognized Coco's personal drive and business ambitions. In the summer of 1909, Coco decided she no longer needed Etienne Balsan. She left him a scribbled note. She followed Capel to Paris that day. Coco was socializing with the most sophisticated and well-connected in the city, and with Boy Capel's money, she could fulfill her dreams. Within a year of her arrival in Paris, Capel and Balsan struck a deal jointly to fund Coco's very first venture.
They had decided to give me a place where I could make my hats, the way they would have given me a toy.
Capel, a wealthy English upperclassman, gave Chanel her first Paris apartment and shops. Capel's style reportedly influenced Chanel's design. Chanel No. 5 bottle. Chanel may have copied the rectangular beveled lines of Charvet's toiletry bottles or Capel's whiskey decanter. She wanted to reproduce it in an exquisite, expensive, delicate glass. Chanel hoped they would settle down together, but he was unfaithful. They were together for 9 years, and Capel didn't stop working with Chanel after marrying his wife, Lady Diana Wyndham, in 1918. But on December 22nd, 1919, Capel unfortunately passed away to a car crash. Chanel reportedly commissioned a roadside memorial for Capel's accident, and Chanel told her friend Paul Morin 25 years after the event, "His death devastated me. Capel was my life." Chanel designed hats while living with Balsan as a hobby that became a business in 1910. She opened Chanel Mode. Chanel sold only hats at this location, which already had a clothing store. Actress Gabrielle Bonheur was really who put Chanel on the map because she wore Chanel's hats in Fernand Nozier's 1912 play Belle Amie. So Doziat later modeled Chanel's hats for Le Mode. Soon after, Chanel became very, very popular. Chanel opened a boutique in Deauville in 1913, financed by Arthur Capel, where she introduced deluxe casual sportswear jerseys. It was in the heart of town on a trendy street. Chanel sold hats, jackets, sweaters, and sailor blouses here. Chanel's sister Antoinette and paternal aunt Adrienne were both supportive. Adrienne and Antoinette modeled Chanel's designs and paraded daily through the town and on its boardwalk. So she later went on to find even more success and opened several more boutiques, and she bought 31 Rue Camden in a fashionable Parisian neighborhood in 1918, and she opened a clothing, hat, and accessories boutiques in 1921, later adding jewelry and fragrances. Chanel owned 5 buildings by 1927. This is the story that's gonna basically, I would say this is the birth of her disdain for those of the Jewish faith, okay? In 1922, Paris Galerie Lafayette, founder of Théophile Bader, introduced Chanel to Pierre Wertheimer. Bader wanted Chanel No. 5 for his store. Chanel partnered with Pierre and Paul Wertheimer, directors of Bourgeois since 1917 and 1924, and they were Jews, okay? The Wertheimers agreed to fully finance Chanel No. 5's production, marketing, and distribution. Wertheimers would get 70% of profits, which I did think that was crazy, and Bader would get 20%, and Chanel licensed her name to Parfume Chanel in exchange for only 10% of the company's stocks. So Chanel later worked for 20 years to gain control of Parfum Chanel. Pierre Wertheimer screwed me, she said, and I don't know, how do you guys feel? Like, this is her product. They took 70. One took 70, the other took 20, and they just gave her 10. They really did screw her in that aspect. I don't know. But this festered some disdain and strong resentment for her to where she really wanted to just get them back for that. And she spent the rest of her life just determined. But we'll get back into that, okay? We'll get back into that. So just remember that part. Now let's get into her substance ruse. So she had a friend, Mistress Sert, wife of Spanish painter Jose Maria Sert, and they were longtime Chanel clients. Mistress was attracted to Chanel's genius, lethal wit, sarcasm, and crazed brutality. They were both pretty mean and nice to each other. Both convent-educated women shared interests in mutual trust. Both used substances, and by 1935, Coco Chanel was a daily morphine injector, a habit she kept until her passing. Luca Turin told Chandler that Chanel was called Coco because she threw the best Coca-Cola parties in Paris, if you know what I mean. Know what I mean with the Coca-Cola. So that's where her name actually came. And there were books that's been written that's alleged that Chanel had affairs with women also, and that Mistress Sert was actually one of her lovers. So I don't know. Chanel's not here to confirm or deny, so we don't know. Lombardi introduced Chanel to Grosvenor. I cannot pronounce those last names, excuse me. And they're known as Bendor in Monte Carlo in 1923. The Duke gave Chanel expensive jewels, art, and a Mayfair home in his 10-year relationship with Chanel. And this is what I said. Chanel knew how to get these men to spend a bag on her, okay? If she was here in today's time, she would have been leading these social media blogs on, how to get a man to give you a bag, because they literally funded her whole career and shot her to the top. She literally, for lack of better word, slept her way all the way to the top and got all her accolades. And she was not ashamed of it. She was definitely not one to be shy with that, and she was not ashamed of it.
All those blue bloods, they turn their noses up at me, but I'll have them groveling at my feet.
Coco was going to show just how ruthless she could be. She would join high society and make it worship her. Her first step was, very deliberately, to rewrite her own history, romanticizing and reinventing her childhood. Coco told so many different stories about who she was and where she came from that many felt it was no longer possible to know the real Coco. The rich, famous, and royalty alike all wanted to be associated with her chic, stylish image. She took an apartment at the renowned Ritz Hotel. There, she shamelessly used sex to enhance her status. Men became mere trophies to her. In the early 1920s, she had an affair with Russian composer Igor Stravinsky. She even had an affair with the richest man in England, the Duke of Westminster. Bendor Grosvenor met Coco in Monte Carlo in the Christmas of 1923, dividing her time between his townhouses in London and country home in Cheshire. She socialized with his friends, incorporated his tweeds into her fashion designs, and even met his friend Winston Churchill.
Now, the Duke's entire, I will spell that on the screen for you guys, fueled Chanel's anti-Jewish sentiments. He was also a homophobe. Paul Morand, Chanel's confidant, quoted Chanel with saying in 1946, and I quote, "Homosexuals, I have seen young women ruined by these awful queers, substances, divorce, scandal. They will use any means to destroy a competitor and to wreak vengeance on a woman. The queers want to be women, but they are lousy women, but they are charming." End quote. And what's crazy is that there are several people that alleged, I was in her circle, that alleged that she would have these fantastic parties at her home where there would be men dressed as women and women dressed as men. She herself dressed often in many photos as male, like the little boy look. So a lot of people thought her homo situation was actually just to cover up who she really was. And she just spoke loudly about it to really hide who she really was. And when asked why she didn't marry the Duke of Westminster, she said, "Westminster has had many duchesses. There is only one Chanel." End quote. Chanel met Samuel Goldwyn in Monaco. And yes, the Goldwyn for, Metro Goldwyn television you know, in 1931. She was introduced by Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich, cousin to Nicholas II. Goldwyn made a proposal to Chanel. He would pay her $1 million, which is about $75 million in today's time, to design costumes for his stars twice a year. And Chanel agreed. Her friend Missia Sert accompanied her to Hollywood. Chanel's experience with Hollywood's film business left her disliking its infantile culture. Chanel said Hollywood was bad taste and it's vulgar. Her film design aesthetic didn't work. New Yorkers speculated, though, that she was just salty and that she left Hollywood because they said her dresses were boring. She dressed a lady too well. Hollywood wants women to reflect two women, end quote. So they wanted you to be a little bit more sensual. It was that era, that era of voluptuous sensuality, and she was just too straightforward. So Chanel designed costumes for several French films instead, including Jean Renoir's 1939 film La Règle du Jeu. By 1935, Chanel's couture employed 4,000 people. Chanel's throne was threatened, though, in the 1930s. The flapper, boyish look and short skirts almost vanished overnight due to Hollywood. Chanel's Hollywood designs weren't successful and didn't boost her reputation. Chanel collaborated with Jean Cocteau on his play Oedipe. So this is what they said. This is a criticism they had to say about this because it did not go well for her. They said the actresses looked like they were wrapped in bandages. The actors looked like they were physically challenged mummies or accident victims. So she was getting some bad press around that time. Chanel closed her shops at the start of World War II. 4,000 women lost their jobs because she said it wasn't a time for fashion. And most of you were like, oh, that was smart of her. Nope. There was a sinister reason why she laid off those 4,000 women and closed the shop. Her biographer, Hal Vaughan, remember I told you we would bring him back up because he was dedicated to exposing her, says that Chanel used the war to retaliate against workers who had struck for higher wages and shorter hours in 1936. Chanel closing her couture house was a political statement. Her association with society elites reportedly intensified her dislike of the Jews, She and many in her circle believed Jews were a threat to Europe because of the Bolsheviks. So Chanel lived at the Ritz during German occupation. It was the preferred residence of German military brass. During this time, she dated Baron Hans Gunther von Dinklage, a German aristocrat. He was a former Prussian army officer and attorney general who had worked in military intelligence since 1920. He arranged her stay at the Ritz. Hal Vaughan's book, Sleeping with the Enemy, Coco Chanel and the Secret War, describes Chanel as a vicious anti-S who praised Hitler. Oh my goodness. World War II specifically, the Nazi, we're just going to call him the N-word, okay? Not that N-word, but this N-word. Both are just bad words. All the N-words are bad words. So remember those guys that took 70% and 20%? Yeah, she was asking, based on that time, she was using the opportunity to get all her earnings back. Chanel used her Aryan status to claim sole ownership in Germany. She wrote, I have an indisputable right of propriety. The profits that I have received from my creation since the foundation of this business are disproportionate, and you can help to repair in part the prejudices I have suffered in the course of these 17 years, end quote. Chanel didn't know that the Wartimers, anticipating the N-word's mandates against Jews, legally turned Parfum Chanel over to Félix Amois in May 1940. So Amois returned Chanel to the Wartimers after the war. So they definitely played chess, not checkers with her. They knew that she would probably try to do this, so they already gave up Chanel to a Frenchman and was like, hey, once this is all over, give it back to us. So after World War II, the business world watched a legal battle for Parfum Chanel with interest and nervousness. If Chanel's N-word ties were made public, it would threaten the brand's reputation and status. So Forbes magazine summarized the Wartimers' dilemma. They said a legal fight could expose Chanel's wartime activities and damage her image and his business. So if her image is destroyed, then Wartimers, they would lose money also, which I don't know. Comment below how you feel about that. If this were my people, I was Haitian, and there was this group that tried to eradicate us from the face of this earth in one of the most massive, I can't use certain words on YouTube, but just tried to destroy all my people. And this group, I owned one of their companies, I was the Wartimers. I don't know. I get the money part, but I would have just made other investments. I could not have someone's name and logo and brand that support this and run it and get money from it. I would feel like I'm betraying my own people also, but then others look at it differently. Like, yeah, she was vicious and mean towards us, but in a sense, we got her back. I don't know. Comment your thoughts. What would you do? Would you have given up Chanel or continue to just profit off of her, especially for her trying to, I don't know. Comment below. The Wartimers and Chanel renegotiated their 1924 contract. Wartimer agreed to pay Chanel's living expenses from, like toothpaste to like yachts if she bought one. So that's how they did it. They told her basically, we'll pay for anything that you need, like expenses wise. And she didn't really have kids, but I'm sure if she had kids, they probably would have been like, okay, your heirs would get this percentage, but they still kept Chanel. Vaughn found declassified archival documents that describe Chanel as a courtier and parfumeur. Agent 57124. She had an agent number, guys. So this information linked Chanel to German intelligence for Vaughn. So Chanel joined the German cause in 1941, working for General Walter Schellenberg at the Reich Security Main Office in Berlin. Schellenberg was tried and convicted of war crimes by the Nuremberg Military Tribunal. Due to liver disease, though, he was released in 1951 and fled to Italy. Chanel paid for his medical care, living expenses, and his funeral, and also took care of his wife and his kids. So that shows a lot of association, if you ask me. Coco's involvement was suspected when German tanks occupied Paris. Chanel took shelter in the deluxe Hotel Ritz, the German military headquarters at the Hotel Ritz. She also fell in love with German embassy employee Baron Hans Gunther von Dinklage. Chanel closed her store when the N-words occupied France, citing patriotic reasons. Her motives became clear when she moved into the same Hotel Ritz as the German military. Chanel wasn't punished for sensual relations with German officers, unlike many French women who were punished, and French women hated her for that. They was like, we got punished, we got labeled traitors for being with these Germans, but her, how did she get away with it? And she was publicly with them.
World War I saw 65 million men on the front lines. Everywhere there was scarcity and hardship, yet amid the misery and despair, the war revealed an opportunity for Coco. Wartime women needed functional working clothes. She grabbed her chance and began to create new wartime designs. By day, her perfume boutique was selling to the wives of Nazi officers, and by evening, she was living cheek by jowl with Nazi commanders. It was around this time that she met Hans Gunther von Dinklage, known as Spatz. He was a German officer and Nazi spy, 13 years her junior. She was 56 years old. Spatz may have been German, but Coco didn't seem to mind. Coco travelled to Berlin and was introduced to Walter Schellenberg, Hitler's chief of foreign intelligence and personal aide to Heinrich Himmler. There and then, the bizarre Operation Modelhut was conceived. By now, Schellenberg was convinced the Nazis would lose the war and was desperate to cut a deal with the Allies. Coco was to be used as bait to lure Churchill into a meeting where he could be persuaded to make peace on terms favourable to the Nazis. Yet Coco was now on record as having collaborated in a Nazi plot. Thousands of female collaborators were rounded up, stripped and paraded in the streets, their hair shorn in public humiliation. Coco would never confirm exactly what happened, but some say she knew too much about the British upper classes. Others claim Churchill personally intervened on her behalf. Coco avoided public humiliation. France turned against her. It was now unsafe for her to remain in Paris. In time, France forgot Coco's wartime history. Europe too fell for her designs. House of Chanel was bigger and better than ever. Coco herself was idolized.
In 1944, when France was liberated, Chanel gave Chanel No. 5 to all GIs. She fled to Switzerland to avoid the N-word spy charges. After liberation, she was interviewed in Paris by British military intelligence officer Malcolm Muggeridge about her relationship with the N-words. So in 1943, Chanel traveled to the RSHA in Berlin, the Lion's Den, with her liaison and old friend, Baron Hans Gunther von Dinklage, also known as Sparrow. by his friends. Chanel and Dinklage were to report to Schellenberg at the RSHA with a plan. Chanel would meet Churchill and persuade him to negotiate with the Germans. Schellenberg told British intelligence after the war that Chanel knew Churchill well enough for political negotiations. So Chanel was questioned in September 1944. The committee had no proof of her collaboration and released her. Chanel's grandniece says that Chanel said when she got back home that Churchill freed me. Churchill's involvement with Chanel after the war was a topic of gossip. Some historians claim that people feared Chanel would expose the pro-inward sympathies and activities of top-level British officials, society elite, and the royal family if she testified about her own activities at the trial. Vaughn writes that some claim Churchill told Duff Cooper to protect Chanel. So allegedly she had info on them all, basically not like the British people of that time, not really liking the Jews either. This is just sad. After 15 years, she reopened her couture house at age 70. Pierre Wertheimer, Chanel's Perfume rival, financed her 1954 couture revival. The French press was wary of Chanel's 1954 comeback collection due to her wartime collaborations and the collection's controversy. American and British press called it a breakthrough for combining fashion and youth. So people forgave her, of course. What did you guys think was going to happen? Edmond Charles Roux said Chanel had become tyrannical and lonely towards the end of her life.
On the last Saturday of her life, she went into the vast showroom to see the new models that she had designed.
Mademoiselle Chanel was a very solitary person at the end of her life, and so on weekends she didn't like being alone.
She hated being alone. It didn't matter if lunch was interesting or gloomy. Every day was different. Authoritarian, abusive, this old woman of genius, high priestess of French haute couture, had only a few friends left in her last years. I think she was a mean person and that she could be horrible to all her friends and that she ended up very much alone, but that happens to everyone, not just to fashion designers. It's more a question of personality than of profession. But if people who are mean to their friends end up all alone, we're not going to cry over them, are we? Those who worked with her up to the end do not refute it. Talent does not excuse the tyranny which Coco Chanel exerted over her subordinates up to the very last days.
Mademoiselle would say, I have to make Manon cry. She has to bathe the collection with her tears. It was a superstition with her. Pinch yourself, think of something, cry so she'll be happy. I didn't even need to force myself because I thought that the model I was presenting was good, and she'd tear the stitches out and ask for me to have it ready for the next day. When you're alone in life, like I am, if you don't watch out, everything very easily becomes absolutely disgusting. A woman without a husband is a woman to be pitied. Yes, she cannot see life as it really is. She's living a lie.
Chanel was 87 and ill in 1971. She prepared the spring catalog as usual, and her maid also said that she took a needle of, substances before she passed away. But this was her last words. This is how you die, to her maid. She died on January 10th, 1971 at the Hotel Ritz, where she lived for 30 years.
She had never married and had no close family, and was now utterly reliant on nightly morphine sedatives to help her sleep.
I've got nothing. I am alone with my millions.
By 1971, Coco, orphan, mistress, millionaire, was growing increasingly frail and difficult.
At the end of the afternoon, alone in her hotel room, Coco Chanel does not feel well. She calls Lilou Marcon.
She called me and said, I told you I wasn't feeling well, but now you really must come because I'm really not feeling well at all. I didn't believe her at all. I thought she was putting on her usual show. She was always telling me she was about to die when she wanted me to come and see her. I went to see her around 6:30 p.m., and I was immediately frightened by her paleness. It was January, it was freezing outside, and she was bathed in sweat. The fact that the window was wide open.
On the 10th of January, at the age of 88, and still officially working, Coco Chanel died at her Ritz apartment. As Coco pushed one last syringe of nightly morphine into her leg, she said,
You see, this is how one dies.
Coco Chanel, who died in solitude, was given a state funeral. Her few friends, her workers, and the tout Paris came to pay their respects to the woman who had found happiness only in her work.
Chanel was a prominent figure in luxury fashion during her life, but her influence has been studied more since 1971. Madame Pompidou organized a hero's funeral for Chanel. Soon, damaging French intelligence documents outlined Chanel's wartime involvements, ending her funeral plans. When it comes to Coco Chanel's belief, Coco Chanel was fascinated by spiritualism and the occult. This interest is reflected in the symbols and motifs she used, such as the lion, and has been a theme in her brand's later collections like the Clairvoyance makeup line, as well as in the work of designers inspired by her. The concept of control over one's destiny that was inspired by Chanel's life is something that has been referenced in other fashion collections, such as one by Karl Lagerfeld, we know, who replaced her as the head of Chanel, called First Spell, notes the Global Times. Notably, her belief in the lucky power of number 5, which led to the name Chanel No. 5. Her interest in divination is explored in new books like The Fashion Oracle, which uses Chanel-inspired archetypes for fashion guidance. Chanel famously believed that number 5 was lucky and symbolic of good fortune. She chose it for the name of her most famous perfume, stating, "I present my dress collections on the 5th day of May, the 5th month of the year, and so we will let this sample number 5 keep the name it has already. It will bring good luck," end quote. Coco Chanel had a lifelong passion for divination, which manifested through her interest in astrology, numerology, and tarot cards. She reportedly wove astrological and numerological elements in her designs, giving them symbolic and cosmic significance. Chanel was known to have used tarot cards and Lenormand cards for personal and business guidance. Her apartment was filled with spiritual objects, including tarot cards and ritual objects from her different travels. She was introduced to Theosophy, which is a mystical philosophy, by her lover Arthur Boyd Capel, which likely deepened her interest in esoteric subjects. So if you don't know what Theosophy is, it's all about Madame Blavatsky, who started that, who was an occultist that put together all the religions. I'll just show you guys a quick clip so you can further understand Chanel's belief.
Helena Blavatsky claimed to channel wisdom from beyond this world. The question is, who was she speaking to?
Helena Petrovna Blavatsky was born in 1831 in Yekaterinoslav, today's Dnipro, Ukraine. She came from nobility. Her father was Colonel Peter von Hahn, a Russian officer of German descent. The von Hahn line was part of the Baltic German nobility, with a long record of military service to the Russian Empire. And her mother, Helena Andreevna Fadeyeva, a novelist who died young. She was from the Dolgorukov family, one of the most ancient and prestigious noble houses in Russia, with roots going back to medieval princes. But young Helena was no ordinary child. From an early age, she claimed to see things others could not. Apparitions, forces moving in the shadows. She had an uncanny gift, what her family called second sight. Servants whispered that the girl was protected by unseen powers. By adolescence, her strange abilities only grew stronger. She seemed fearless, reckless even, often riding wild horses with no saddle, or slipping into trances where she spoke of visions no one could explain. The natural world, stones, rivers, and forests, felt alive to her. She believed they carried voices, messages from beyond. But these experiences were not dismissed as childish imagination.
Blavatsky and Olcott traveled extensively around the subcontinent to promote interest in her great work. They eventually established in the south at Adyar, near Madras, the headquarters for the Theosophical Society. Blavatsky was developing a reputation for producing astounding psychic phenomena. In an empty room, bells would ring, furniture move. Most importantly, letters written to her and her associates by the masters were apported.
It was the beginning of a movement that would ripple across the world. This was the turning point. The wandering mystic had become a leader, and the teachings of the Mahatmas were about to ripple into the modern world. 2 massive volumes, nearly 1,300 pages. She attacked modern science for its arrogance, for reducing the universe to dead matter and blind chance. She attacked Christianity for twisting older truths into dogma. And she insisted that behind all religions, behind every mythology and philosophy, there existed a single current of ancient wisdom, a wisdom guarded by hidden initiates, stretching back to Egypt, India, and Atlantis. She pulled from Hermetic texts, the Kabbalah, Gnosticism, Hinduism, Buddhism, and more. The message was clear. All traditions were fragments of one great truth. She claimed she was not the author, but the channel. The Mahatmas, the hidden masters, were behind the work. Some said she wrote in trances, pages flowing as if dictated from beyond. Isis Unveiled was presented as a master key, and the masters themselves were the silent architects of its knowledge. The first volume, Science, opens with an attack on modern materialism. She accused science of arrogance, of reducing reality to lifeless matter while ignoring psychic and astral forces. Here she introduced the idea of the inner man, a spiritual core beyond the physical body, and hinted at reincarnation and karma, ideas that would later become central to theosophy. She argued that hidden laws of nature were already known to the ancients. The phenomena studied in seances, she claimed, were real, but the mediums misunderstood the forces they were tapping into. To her, these were the echoes of a far older science, the wisdom religion. To her, the veiled goddess Isis was the symbol of nature itself, hidden, secret, waiting to be revealed.
So modern analysis of her work often connects her designs to her personal beliefs, viewing her little black dress or other iconic pieces as extensions of her spirit and life philosophy. According to FromTheMorgue.com, which is an occult website that dives deep in the darker side of things, in the early 20th century, occult and satanic fashion became more mainstream. Popular fashion designers such as Coco Chanel and Christian Dior began to incorporate occult symbols into their designs. This trend was further popularized by the rise of the punk movement in the 1970s and 1980s. Punk fashion often featured occult symbols such as pentagrams, the skulls, and inverted cross, all of that, right? The occult and satanic fashion has been embraced by many celebrities and fashion designers who have used it to create unique and eye-catching looks. This trend has been seen as on the runways of fashion weeks around the world, as well as in the music videos of some of the biggest stars in the industry. And Chanel helped popularize the modern fashion, occult fashion that we see today. Even Chanel using the colors black and white is to symbolize duality, both light and dark magic. She had Masonic ties, and spiritualists believe her influence in the world was to normalize male fashion to women, to blur the lines between the feminine and masculine. She made it popular for women to dress in male fashion in a time where that would have been scandalous. Her fashion and lifestyle also influenced promiscuity, dominance, and that led many women of her generation into a different lifestyle.
And she was one of the first to put women into chic, stylish trousers. And by having a career and enjoying a liberated love life, she symbolized the post-war aspirations of a generation of newly emancipated women. She was now an industry leader in a previously male-dominated world.
She was also known to be bisexual and had multiple lovers at a time, even in her old age.
She was so afraid of solitude that she became attached to a man 50 years her junior, François Mironnet. The first time I listened to her talk lasted from 2 in the afternoon on a Saturday afternoon until 9 that evening nonstop. We had a platonic friendship. 2 occasions it deteriorated into feelings of love on her part.
Yes, she had passionate relationships with everyone who was close to her, not just with me. And her relationships were always that way, always extreme, always very, very passionate relationships.
She would also reportedly indulge in group sexual interactions with her lovers, and spiritualists believe she was able to control her lovers and her destiny through sex magic. This is how she got them to sponsor her life, basically. And through this sex magic, basically her curse was to never really have true love and never be the wife, but a perpetual mistress, which she was not proud of at her last days. In the end, Chanel admitted that she was bitterly unhappy and felt unfulfilled. She suffered a lot of pain and never truly knew happiness. She stated, and I quote, "If I could do it all over again, I would choose to love and settle down with a family of my own," end quote.
A woman who is not loved is nothing, and that's that. No matter how old she is, young, old, mother, mistress, whatever, a woman who is not loved is a lost woman. When you're alone in life, like I am, if you don't watch out, everything very easily becomes absolutely disgusting. A woman without a husband is a woman to be pitied. Yes, she cannot see life as it really is. She's living a lie.
She resented her millions in the end and found everyone and everything disgusting. Substances was the only thing that made her feel happy, and she died shooting herself with one more shot of morphine. But to the public, she is a legend. Many people would have fought to have the life Chanel did, though she herself tried very hard to run from it. What do you think of all of this? And on my Mental Gems, if you're a subscriber over there, I already did a fashion breakdown on all of this type of stuff with the different fashion brands, Yves Saint Laurent, etc., what their beliefs are and how they weave them into their fashion. I also did a sex magic video as well, but those are on my Mental Gems channel. So for those who are interested to break down what sex magic is, etc., and the fashion industry as well in that video, and what it is and how they incorporate, occult symbolism, beliefs into it. But it is, disclaimer, from a perspective, a biblical perspective. It is coming from my personal views and belief of, running away from that lifestyle, not really participating in the occult. So if you're not interested based on my personal view, because I am very biased in those videos, don't watch because you're just going to be annoyed. But if you're interested and want to know a little bit of the history and symbolism behind it and just of the perspective of running away from that lifestyle or turning away from it, then check it out. I will pin them in the comments along with one of Chanel's quotes, okay? If you're interested. But comment below your thoughts on all of this, and wow, what a life did she live? Now, this is what I have for her, so I'll leave you with this question. Would you say, this was so long ago, being that Chanel is not owned by any Chanel descendants, or anything like that, can we still purchase Chanel and be like it's a luxury item, knowing all that we know? Can we support Chanel, but not Chanel the brand, but not Chanel the person? I want you guys to comment below that. But I love you guys so much. Thank you for tuning in. Comment below who else would you guys like a video for. And if you like the music you're listening to, the link is in the description. Turn on your notification bell and subscribe for more videos like this coming up soon. I love you guys so much. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time.